good bishop versus the bad bishop. Bobby Fischer could win that game because he was a great endgame player, but a lot of us, we still can't win. It's very difficult to win. Chess is not easy, but one thing at a time. Let's at least develop our pieces, and we'll start teaching you a little bit of strategy, and then we'll worry about the end game, down the road. But at some point, we'll have to study some end games. And there are books. There's a book that I can recommend, but it costs about $25. See, chess books can be expensive, called The Complete Endgame Course by an international master, Jeremy Silman, where it's not the most thorough endgame book again, but it's the most reader-friendly. Some of these endgame books are almost impossible to read. But if you can, so they're more thorough, they're probably better endgame books in that sense, that they're more complete, but they're not very reader-friendly. So the books I recommend for my students are the ones that you can actually read and understand.
So at this stage of the game, do you depending on your positions and opponent position, do you choose a strategy, or do you go in with a predetermined strategy, breaking the pawn chain or whatever?
That's a very good question. In simple chess, by the way, some chess authors are good chess players, but they flunk a creative writing class because they use some really bad mixed metaphors. So Michael Steen, who's a great grandmaster, he wrote that this part is good. The first part, he says that the most important consideration in any chess position is piece activity, which is good, and the number one constraint against piece activity is the pawn structure, which is also good. But then he says that the pawn structure is like the iron framework of a building, except that it's flexible. Now, I don't know if I'd want to live in a building with a flexible iron framework. The creative writing teacher would say that's weak, change that, But, so what I prefer to use as a metaphor is the traffic on the road out there. When I'm driving my car, at any moment, the traffic pattern can change. So my initial strategy is step on the gas. All of a sudden, a police car comes by with a siren. Well, I better change my strategy. Now I better stop and let him go by, The guy in front of me, all of a sudden, he slows down. Well, I better slow down as well. So the answer to your question is, you have to constantly, all game long, reevaluate every single move on the board. Forces you to put your thinking cap on and say, now wait a minute, this is not the exact same position. It's almost the exact same position, but it's a little bit different now. Now, do I stick with plan A, or maybe now I got to go to plan B? Maybe plan C. So the answer to your question is that as the position changes, you have to constantly judge. Good judgment. In fact, yesterday at the Montessori school, I was showing them examples from a chess book of chess players who had bad judgment. They got the exact position that they wanted, only to realize when it was too late, I thought this was going to be a good position, but it's a bad position. So that's a very good question, but the answer to it is that in addition to looking ahead, see, strategy is about the future. It's never about the present. So if I have a plan, when my financial advisor asked me when I retired, Jim, what's your financial strategy? He wasn't talking about today, he's talking about 10 years from now, all right? So in chess, you not only have to have a strategy, but you better make sure before you use that strategy that at the end of it all, you're going to have a good position. So if I told my financial advisor, well, my strategy is capital preservation at very low risk, which I told him, but then I foolishly invested it in a junk bond fund, and I got wiped out because the market turned south. Well, that was bad judgment on my part. In other words, I didn't implement my strategy properly. But something like that will happen in chess very often, where it's a very good question, and the answer to the question is judgment. And that's something that you learn by losing. I mean, the only, everybody loses at chess. And in chess, we have a saying that when you win, you earn. You earn a trophy, you earn a medal, you earn money or rating points, and when you lose, you learn. And that's really what it boils down to. Every time you lose a game, you have to make lemonade out of that lemon. You have to say, okay, that was a lemon of a game, but now I have to squeeze something positive out of it. I got to study it, and now next time I'll have better judgment. I won't make the same foolish mistake. But then maybe you'll make a different foolish mistake, and you'll learn from that game. And then eventually, it took me nearly 8 years, then you become a chess master. I never made, international master or grandmaster, obviously, because they're even better at it than I am. But if you have good judgment, and the only way that I know of that you get good judgment is by trial and error. You find out the hard way at the board. And some players are just better at it than others. Mozart composed a symphony when he was 2 years old, supposedly. Some people are just born geniuses, but for most of us, we have to work at it, and it's a learning, expanding your learning curve is the way I would answer that question. In fact, if I knew how you could do it, I would be the greatest chess teacher in the world. All my students would be grandmasters now.
Okay.
I could just put it in a bottle and say, okay, just drink this magic potion and you'll all be strong.